Hi, I'm Jen Berta. Welcome to Back to Basics Bible Studies, where I share with you some of the foundational Bible studies that have blessed me through the years. Today, we'll look again at the life of Christ and we'll look at the four Gospels and compare them. So let's dig in. Why four Gospels? Does the number four have any significance? And that's the question that starts our study today. The number four is sometimes referred to as the number of earth or the number of natural creation. There are four seasons, there are four principal directions, and there are four ancient elements. In addition, we speak of the four corners of the earth, the four winds. In type, we see that the number four is seen in the following: the four streams coming out of one in the book of Genesis. So we'll look now at Genesis chapter 2 and verse 10. Now a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it parted and became four riverheads. Next, we see the four pillars holding up the veil in the tabernacle of Moses. So now let's look at Exodus chapter 26, verses 31 and 32. You shall make a veil woven of blue, purple, and scarlet thread, and fine woven linen. It shall be woven with an artistic design of cherubim. You shall hang it upon the four pillars of acacia wood, overlaid with gold. Their hooks shall be gold, upon four sockets of silver. So the veil in the tabernacle of Moses was a symbol of Christ's body, or a symbol of his flesh. And Hebrews chapter 10 says, therefore, brethren, having boldness to enter the holiest by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way, which he consecrated for us through the veil, that is, his flesh. It is interesting that in conjunction with his death, the veil in the temple was rent at the same time that his body died. Another question: why do the differing accounts give us such a different view? Let's look at that. The four accounts give us different pictures or facets of Christ's earthly ministry. In some ways, the accounts give us as much insight into the authors of the books as it does to Christ himself. No two people will look at anything exactly the same way, and who we are as individuals will affect the way we see things and our impression of things. So, in order to give us a well-rounded view of Jesus, God has taken four distinctly different individuals and given us each of their views of Jesus. In these four views, we can all find enough information for us to know Jesus in different facets through his earthly walk. And in that way, we'll be able to appreciate him more in his fullness. We'll begin to know him. We'll come to know him. So, what are the four distinct pictures that the four Gospels give us of Christ? Let's start there. As we look at the four Gospels, each one of them has significant value in getting a full view of Christ. Just like a diamond that is studied from different angles, and the assessor or the jeweler looks into each of the facets in order to determine the true value. In that way, we see Christ through the eyes and see his facets through the eyes of these four observers. The following are a few ways in which the four Gospels show us Christ. A, the four prophetic streams. The first prophetic stream declares, "Behold your King." Matthew is the gospel that focuses on Jesus as the King and his kingdom. It is in his gospel, in Matthew's gospel, that Jesus goes up on a mountain in a kingly manner, sits down, and gives the laws of his kingdom. In his genealogy, Matthew traces Jesus' lineage to King David. Behold your King. Next, behold my servant. And Mark is the gospel that views Jesus as the servant. In Mark's gospel, Jesus has no genealogy, no spectacular birth or heavenly choirs, but Jesus is a doer of deeds. He is a man of action, and that's how he is portrayed, as a servant in the Gospel of Mark. Behold the man. And in Luke's Gospel, it focuses on the humanity of Jesus and presents him as a true human man. The key title in his Gospel in reference to Jesus is the Son of Man. Luke traces Jesus' genealogy back to the first man, Adam. Behold your God. So John's gospel is the gospel of Jesus' deity. He presents Jesus as the Son of God, who is without beginning, without end. His genealogy starts with God himself and with Jesus' pre-existent union with the eternal God. John places a great deal of emphasis on Jesus' oneness with the Father. Let's look now at the four colors in the tabernacle. The four colors that were used in the veil in the tabernacle of Moses pointed to Jesus as the true tabernacle and reflect in type these same four gospel streams. Let's look at Exodus chapter 26 again, verses 31 and 32. And we're going to read these scriptures again to review these colors. You shall make a veil woven of blue, purple, and scarlet thread, and fine woven linen, and it shall be woven with an artistic design of cherubim. You shall hang it upon the four pillars of acacia wood overlaid with gold, and their hooks shall be gold upon four sockets of silver. So how does this typify the four gospels? Purple. Purple is a kingly color, and it speaks of royalty. Matthew is the gospel of Jesus's kingly splendor, his royal splendor. Scarlet. Scarlet is the color of blood, and it speaks of the pouring out of one's life in humble service and suffering. So Mark is the gospel of Jesus's servanthood, doing for others what they cannot do for themselves. Fine linen. The fine linen was bleached white by the sun, and it speaks of the spotless man who lived a perfect life to become our sin bearer. Luke is the gospel of Jesus' perfect humanity, perfection in humanity. Blue. Blue is the heavenly color and speaks of Jesus as the Lord of heaven. John presents to us Jesus as the heavenly manna that came down from above. Let's look at John chapter 6 and verses 30 through 40. Therefore they said to him, What sign will you perform then, that we may see it and believe you? What work will you do? Our fathers ate manna in the desert, as it is written, He gave them bread from heaven to eat. Then Jesus said to them, Most assuredly I say to you, Moses did not give you the bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Then they said to him, Lord, give us this bread always. And Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. But I said to you that you have seen me, and yet do not believe. All that the Father gives me will come to me, and the one who comes to me I will by no means cast out. For I have come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. This is the will of the Father who sent me, that of all he has given me I should lose nothing, but shall raise it up at the last day. And this is the will of him who sent me, that everyone who sees the Son and believes in him may have everlasting life, and I will raise him up at the last day. So we see here John presenting to us Jesus as that heavenly manna that came down from the Father. Now let's look at the four faces of the cherubim. The four faces described by Ezekiel chapter 1 reflect in type the same four gospel streams that we're talking about today. So let's take a moment to look at Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 5 through 11. Also from within it came the likeness of four living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. Each one had four faces, and each one had four wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the soles of calves' feet. They sparkled like the color of burnished bronze. The hands of a man were under their wings on their four sides, and each of the four had faces and wings. Their wings touched one another. The creatures did not turn when they went, but each one went straight forward. As for the likeness of their faces, each had the face of a man. Each of the four had the face of a lion. And on the right side, each of the four had the face of an ox. On the left side, and each of the four had the face of an eagle. Thus were their faces. Their wings stretched upwards, two wings of each one touched one another, and two covered their bodies. So we focus on the portion in verse 10 and the beginning of verse 11 concerning the faces of these creatures. And it tells us that each had the face of a man. Each of the four had the face of a lion on the right side. Each of the four had the face of an ox on the left side. And each of the four had the face of an eagle. Thus were their faces. The lion with its kingly crown is referred to as the king of beasts. Matthew shows us Jesus as the lion of the tribe of Judah. In Revelation chapter 5, verse 5, we see Jesus presented as the lion of the tribe of Judah. The ox was used in the culture of the day as a beast of burden and a symbol of work. Jesus is our burden bearer who is presented to us in Mark's gospel. He is presented as the one who carries what we cannot bear. He is the beast of burden presented to us in the Gospel of Mark. The man. Now, Luke's Gospel presents Jesus as a man of compassion, a man of blood, a man of feelings, who is acquainted with our sorrows, qualifying him as our sympathetic priest. The eagle. The eagle is a glorious creature who symbolizes majesty, and the eagle soars high above the earth and has the vision to see well beyond man. The eagle has an extra set of eyelids and is the only bird that can look directly into the sun. John is the one who displays to us the glory of the sun. Now let's look at their four genealogies that are presented in the four Gospels. They reflect the same four gospel streams. Matthew traces Jesus' lineage back to Abraham, the first one to receive the promise of kings, and to King David to establish his right to the throne. Mark has no genealogy because there was no value in type for recording the lineage of a slave, a servant, one born for action and work. Luke traces Jesus' lineage back to Adam through his mother Mary. This genealogy does two things. Like Matthew, it traces Jesus back to David and Judah, thus giving him the right to the throne of David. But it also goes all the way back to Adam, making Jesus fit to be our near kinsman and redeemer, the last Adam. And John's genealogy is God. Jesus is God and therefore has no beginning or no end. Look at the four Old Testament offices. They were highlighted in the Old Testament and they pointed to Jesus, who would be the ultimate fulfillment of each one of them. The four Gospels also reflect these four gospel streams or these four offices in type. The king. The office of Christ's kingship is presented in Matthew. And you remember the first Old Testament office under consideration is a type of Christ the King of Kings. The next Old Testament office, prophet. Christ as the prophet or suffering servant is announced by prophecy in the Gospel of Mark. Let's look at Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 3. The voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. The next Old Testament office is a priest. Luke begins with a priest and pictures Christ as the sympathetic high priest who identifies with fallen man. Isn't that good? That is just beautiful. So when you consider, let's just go back and consider the king, Christ as prophet, Christ as priest, and Christ as judge. The ultimate judge is God. Through the Gospel of John, the relationship of the Son to the Father, indeed the Son in the Father and the Father in the Son, is highlighted, and a thread that runs through it is that the Father has placed judgment into the hands of the Son. We'll look at John chapter 5 and verse 22. For the Father judges no one, but has committed all judgment to the Son. And we'll look at verse 27. And it says, and has given him authority to execute judgment also, because he is the Son of Man. And so the Father has committed judgment into the hands of the Son. Now let's look at 4 aspects of his sonship. And these also reflect the 4 Gospels. The Son of David is in Matthew. The Son of Man is represented in Mark. The Son of Adam is portrayed in Luke. And the Son of God is shown to us in the Gospel of John. Look now at the 4 different audiences for the Gospels. Matthew was written to the Jews. It contains more Old Testament references than any of the other Gospels and clearly establishes Jesus as the fulfillment of prophecy and the King Messiah for whom they were waiting. He talks more about the King and the kingdom than any other of the evangelists. Mark was written to the Romans. The Romans were not as interested in what a person said as in what they did. They were not the philosophers that the Greeks were. They were pragmatists. In Mark's gospel, Jesus is a man of few words and great action. The focus is on his works of service. Luke was written to the Greeks. The Greeks were impressed with learning and culture. Luke was the most educated and cultured of all the evangelists, and his writing reflects a much higher vocabulary and is written in a more educated style. John was written to the world. It is interesting that when people give out testaments or tracts for evangelism, it is usually John 3:16 or the Gospel of John that is selected. It reflects the coming of Christ as a reflection of God's love for the world. Now let's look at the 4 different evangelists themselves. Matthew was a Jew who originally worked as a Roman official. Mark was a servant to the Apostle Paul and Barnabas and a minister who eventually proved profitable. Luke was a Gentile and a trained physician who became a very close friend and regular traveling companion of the Apostle Paul. And John was originally a fisherman who became perhaps Jesus' most beloved friend. Thank you so much for joining me in this video. In the next video, we'll look at another Bible study that has really blessed my life through the years.